A blue glow fills a quiet room. A single screen scrolls endlessly, full of faces, headlines, and carefully edited moments. The notifications keep coming, but the feeling of being genuinely seen does not. Modern social apps promised connection on a scale humanity had never seen before. More friends, more followers, more chances to stay in touch with everyone all the time. Yet in survey after survey, people report feeling more isolated, more anxious, and more emotionally distant than in previous decades. Somewhere between the promise and the reality, something fractured. This is the great app divide. A world where connection is constant but community is scarce. On mainstream platforms, the illusion of connection begins with the feed. Every swipe delivers a new fragment, a joke, a vacation photo, a hot take, a short video, a tragedy from halfway around the world. Interaction becomes a stream of tiny gestures, likes, reactions, short comments, quick replies that disappear under the next wave of content. Each action looks like connection on a graph, but the emotional depth of those interactions is often very shallow. Large platforms push toward performance. Lives turn into highlight reels, carefully curated to look impressive, interesting, or at least acceptable. A subtle pressure forms. People begin to ask not, is this meaningful, but will this look good? Over time, a gap opens between the private self and the public persona. That gap is filled with comparison. Someone else always seems to have more success, more beauty, more attention, more stability. The friend list grows, but conversations shrink. Old classmates, coworkers, and acquaintances remain technically connected for years, yet meaningful exchanges become rare. The result is a strange kind of loneliness. Surrounded by evidence of other people's lives, yet unsure who would actually notice if one simply disappeared from the feed. This is not just an individual problem. It is a structural pattern built into how large platforms are designed to scale. In the shadow of these giant platforms, a quieter pattern has been taking shape. Small, focused groups have been forming, spaces that do not aim to capture everyone, but instead welcome the very specific few. These are micro-communities. Not just small groups, but carefully shaped environments built around niche interests, shared passions, or very particular experiences. Micro here does not simply mean small in number. It means concentrated. A micro-community might revolve around knitting for absolute beginners, one obscure strategy game, a local tenant union, or people committed to a specific form of sustainable living. Entry is often more intentional than a simple follow button. There might be a short description to read, norms to agree with, or an introduction post where newcomers share a bit about themselves. These spaces live in many corners of the internet. A Discord server, a bespoke forum, a private group chat, a members-only board attached to a small website. Crucially, they do not rely on the same kind of heavy algorithmic sorting that defines big feeds. Posts appear because members write to each other, not because a system predicts maximum engagement. Growth is slower and more deliberate. Some communities stay at a few dozen or a few hundred people for years by design. For them, success is not measured in subscriber counts, but in the quality of the relationships formed inside. Consider a small digital haven called Yarniverse. On the surface, it's just a knitting community. Channels for patterns, yarn recommendations, troubleshooting, and casual conversation. New members often arrive uncertain. They post a first project, crooked, uneven, or unfinished, with a tentative photo. In many public spaces, that vulnerability could invite silence or cruelty. In Yarniverse, it tends to receive encouragement, practical tips, and sometimes a small wave of similar first attempt photos from others. Over time, finished items become markers in people's lives. A blanket completed during a difficult recovery. A sweater knit for a long-awaited child. A scarf carried through a stressful exam season. The craft gives the community its language. But what keeps people returning is the feeling that their efforts and struggles are recognized by familiar names. In another corner of the internet, a forum keeps an older, obscure game alive. The official servers shut down years ago. The company moved on. Yet this group still posts new strategy guides, balance discussions, and fan-made patches. Some members maintain compatibility fixes so the game runs on modern machines. A new player, discovering the game decades late, does not find an empty relic. They find a living archive kept alive by a few dedicated people. The micro-community preserves more than software. It preserves a tiny piece of culture, shared stories, tactics, and memories that would otherwise have vanished quietly. Elsewhere, a private online collective focuses on sustainable living. Members are not just sharing aesthetic photos of perfect gardens and spotless kitchens. They discuss cramped balconies, stubborn landlords, tight budgets, and failed experiences. A compost pile that went badly wrong. A solar quote that proved unrealistic. A neighborhood meeting that did not go as planned. Advice in this space is practical, detailed, and grounded in lived experience. Progress is measured in small wins. A better insulation choice, a successful shared tool program, a school garden that finally gets approval. In a broader online world where sustainability can become just a brand, this micro-community functions as a workshop. It's less about image and more about mutual support in the messy reality of change. Across these very different examples, certain patterns appear again and again. First, engagement is high, but noise is low. Fewer messages are posted, yet those messages receive deeper attention. Conversations often unfold over days instead of minutes. Second, shared values form the backbone of these spaces. Kindness to beginners, evidence-based discussion, a low-drama environment, or a clear ethical stance. These are not just slogans on a welcome page. They guide moderation, shape events, and influence how conflicts are resolved. When disagreements occur, members still remember what the community is for. The goal is not to win an argument for an invisible audience, but to preserve a space that everyone depends on. Third, members are not treated as an audience. They are expected and invited to become co-creators. In thriving micro-communities, people propose new channels, organize study groups, host game nights, write guides, or run small challenges. Responsibility is shared, not centralized in one charismatic figure. Over time, small rituals and inside jokes emerge. Annual events, recurring themes, a particular emoji that means something only to this group. These details give the community its own texture, distinct from any platform that hosts it. For many, the path into these spaces begins with a simple realization that the interactions which feel most alive are rarely the ones optimized for public performance. Instead of chasing vague, impressive labels, people start to focus on very specific interests or experiences. Not just gaming, but a certain genre or era. Not just self-improvement, but a concrete skill. Not just climate, but a local watershed or a particular kind of project. With that clarity, searching becomes less random. A person might look for Discord for retro mech games, forum for balcony gardening in cold climates, or online group for adult beginners learning music theory from scratch. The first few attempts may not fit. Some communities feel inactive. Others clash with personal values or expectations. Over time, however, patterns emerge. Groups where questions receive thoughtful answers. Spaces where newcomers are acknowledged. Histories of conversation that show depth instead of constant conflict. Joining is only the beginning. Belonging grows through participation. Small contributions, sharing a story, asking a careful question, thanking someone for a resource, posting a work in progress, gradually change one's place in the group. Names become familiar. Other members begin to remember past projects, past struggles, past jokes. The community stops feeling like they and begins to feel like we. In an era dominated by massive platforms, it is easy to assume that meaningful connection must also be massive. Micro-communities suggest something different. They show that the most significant digital relationships often form in spaces small enough for people to notice a single absence, celebrate a single success, or patiently walk through a single problem together. These spaces do not solve every form of loneliness. They cannot replace local ties, family, or offline care. But they redraw the map of what online life can be. Not a vast, noisy plaza where everyone performs for everyone else, but a network of small rooms where people gather around shared passions, shared challenges, and shared futures. Beyond apps and beyond follower counts, micro-communities quietly demonstrate that connection is not just a matter of scale. It is a matter of depth, attention, and the patient work of showing up for one another over time.